After the end of the Great War in 1918, Italy was a nation adrift. It had fought on the winning side, alongside Britain, France, and the United States, but it did not feel like a victor. The country had suffered enormous losses, with hundreds of thousands of young men killed in the brutal mountain warfare against the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The promises made by its allies of new lands and greater influence seemed to have been forgotten at the peace talks. Italians felt they had paid a heavy price in blood and treasure, only to be left with scraps from the table. This feeling of a mutilated victory created a deep and lasting bitterness that spread across the land, poisoning the political atmosphere and leaving people searching for someone to blame for their national humiliation. The Italian economy was in ruins. The immense cost of the war had plunged the government into staggering debt, leading to rampant inflation that made everyday life a struggle for ordinary families. The money in their pockets was worth less and less each day, and the price of bread, a staple of the Italian diet, skyrocketed. Soldiers returning from the front lines found a country that had no jobs for them. Factories, which had been churning out weapons and uniforms, were slow to switch back to producing goods for peacetime. The widespread unemployment created a sense of hopelessness and despair, particularly among the veterans who felt their sacrifice had been for nothing. They had fought for their country, and now their country seemed to have abandoned them entirely. This economic hardship and national disappointment created fertile ground for political unrest. The government in Rome seemed weak, indecisive, and utterly incapable of solving the nation's problems. Parliament was paralyzed by constant squabbling between different political parties, none of which could command enough support to govern effectively. Across the country, strikes broke out as workers demanded better wages and working conditions. In the industrial north, some workers, inspired by the communist revolution in Russia, seized control of their factories. In the rural south, landless peasants occupied the large estates of wealthy landowners. The fear of a communist takeover gripped the middle class and the industrial elites, who longed for a strong leader to restore order. Amid this chaos, many Italians lost faith in democracy. The system of elected representatives and parliamentary debate appeared to be a failure, a luxury the country could no longer afford. People craved stability, strength, and a return to national pride. They were tired of the political bickering, the economic misery, and the sense of being a second-rate power in Europe. This deep yearning for a savior, for someone who could cut through the noise and get things done, set the stage for a new kind of politics. A man was waiting in the wings, a man who understood their anger and their fears, and who promised to make Italy great again. His name was Benito Mussolini. Benito Mussolini was not born into power. He came from a humble background, the son of a blacksmith and a school teacher. In his youth, he was a passionate socialist, a fiery journalist who wrote articles denouncing the state and capitalism. He was a troublemaker, an agitator who was arrested and exiled for his radical political activities. But the Great War changed him profoundly. While many socialists opposed the war, Mussolini saw it as an opportunity for revolution and national renewal. He broke with the socialists, served in the army until he was wounded, and returned to Italy a changed man. He no longer believed in international class struggle. He now believed in the nation. He saw Italy's destiny as one of strength, unity, and glory. After the war, Mussolini tapped into the deep well of national discontent. He founded his own newspaper, Il Popolo d'Italia, which became a powerful mouthpiece for his emerging ideology. Through his writing and his speeches, he gave voice to the frustrations of the returning soldiers, the anxious middle class, and anyone who felt let down by the government. He was a master of communication, a charismatic speaker who knew how to connect with a crowd. He used simple, powerful language, promising to crush the communists, restore law and order, and reclaim Italy's rightful place in the world. He spoke of discipline, sacrifice, and action, words that resonated with a populace tired of weakness and chaos. To back up his words with force, Mussolini created a paramilitary group known as the Black Shirts. These were his most ardent followers, mostly disgruntled war veterans and nationalistic youths who were drawn to his message of action and violence. Dressed in their distinctive black uniforms, a symbol of mourning for Italy's plight, they roamed the streets, breaking up socialist rallies, intimidating political opponents, and battling with communists and trade unionists. The Black Shirts projected an image of strength and decisiveness that the official government lacked. To many Italians, particularly business owners and landowners who feared a communist revolution, the black shirts were seen not as thugs, but as patriots who were restoring order where the state had failed. Fascism, the political movement Mussolini created, was not a complicated philosophy. At its core, it was simple and direct. Fascism meant that the nation was more important than anything else, more important than the individual, more important than social class, and more important than democracy. It taught that a single, all-powerful leader was needed to guide the country to its destiny. It glorified violence as a necessary tool for political change and celebrated war as the ultimate test of a nation's strength. It was fiercely nationalistic, believing in the superiority of the Italian people and their right to expand and dominate. Fascism rejected democracy as weak and inefficient and despised communism for its focus on class conflict, which it saw as a threat to national unity. By the autumn of 1925, Mussolini felt that the time was right to make his move. He had built a powerful movement with a loyal army of black shirts at his command, and he had gained the tacit support of influential figures in the military, the business community, and even the royal court. The democratic government remained weak and divided, unable to mount any effective resistance against the rising tide of fascism. In October, at a large gathering of his followers in Naples, Mussolini delivered an ultimatum. Either the government would be handed over to the fascists, or they would take it by force. He declared, "Our program is simple. We want to govern Italy." The crowd roared its approval, and the stage was set for a final confrontation. This threat culminated in the March on Rome. Thousands of black shirts from all over Italy began to converge on the capital, mobilized to seize control of the government. In reality, the march was more of a political bluff than a genuine military invasion. The Italian army could have easily dispersed the poorly armed fascist squads. However, the event created an immense sense of crisis and panic. Prime Minister Luigi Facta wanted to declare a state of emergency and use the army to stop the marchers, but King Victor Emmanuel III refused to sign the order. The king feared that ordering the army to fire on the black shirts, who included many former soldiers, could trigger a full-blown civil war. He was also worried that his own cousin, a known fascist sympathizer, might be installed as a more compliant monarch. Faced with the king's refusal and the looming threat of chaos, the government collapsed. Seeing no other way to avoid bloodshed and restore stability, King Victor Emmanuel III made a fateful decision. On October 29, 1925, he sent a telegram to Mussolini, who had been waiting cautiously in Milan, far from the march itself. The king invited Mussolini to come to Rome to form a new government. The next day, Mussolini arrived by train, not as a conqueror at the head of an army, but as the legally appointed Prime Minister of Italy. The march on Rome had succeeded not through force of arms, but through political intimidation and the monarchy's loss of nerve. The era of Italian democracy was effectively over. Once in power, Mussolini moved swiftly to consolidate his authority and dismantle the institutions of democracy. Initially, he led a coalition government that included members of other political parties, creating an illusion of normalcy. But behind the scenes, he worked methodically to ensure that all real power was concentrated in his hands. He passed a law that gave his party a guaranteed majority in parliament, making any meaningful opposition impossible. He created a secret police force to spy on and suppress dissent. Political opponents were arrested, exiled, or in some cases murdered. Within a few years, Italy was no longer a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary system. It was a one-party dictatorship, with Benito Mussolini as its unquestioned leader, known as Il Duce. With his power secure, Mussolini began to reshape Italy according to his fascist vision. The government took control of nearly every aspect of public and private life. The state, not the individual, was supreme. Mussolini launched ambitious public works projects such as draining the Pontine marshes near Rome to create new farmland and building new roads and railways. These projects were designed to modernize the country, reduce unemployment, and showcase the efficiency and power of the fascist regime. The trains, it was famously said, now ran on time, a potent symbol of the new discipline and order that Mussolini had imposed on a country once known for its charming but frustrating disorganization. The state's influence extended into the economy, with the government directing industries and mediating labor disputes to ensure national goals were met. Propaganda was central to maintaining Mussolini's rule. He understood the power of image and perception better than any of his contemporaries. His face was everywhere, on posters, in newspapers, and in newsreels shown in cinemas across the country. He was portrayed as a superman, a tireless leader who was single-handedly rebuilding Italy and restoring the glory of the ancient Roman Empire. School children were taught to revere him as the savior of the nation, chanting slogans like "Mussolini is always right." Massive rallies, complete with dramatic speeches from balconies, military parades, and athletic displays, were carefully staged to create a sense of national unity and overwhelming power. This cult of personality was designed to make his rule seem not just necessary but natural and heroic. However, the pursuit of imperial glory would ultimately lead Italy to disaster. Mussolini dreamed of creating a new Roman Empire, expanding Italy's influence across the Mediterranean and into Africa. In 1935, he ordered the invasion of Ethiopia, a brutal conquest that was condemned by other European nations but celebrated at home as a great victory. This aggressive foreign policy isolated Italy from its former allies, Britain and France, and pushed Mussolini into a closer relationship with another rising dictator, Adolf Hitler in Germany. In 1939, Mussolini signed the Pact of Steel, a formal military alliance with Nazi Germany, tying Italy's fate to Hitler's ambitions. It was a decision that would have catastrophic consequences for the Italian people. When World War II broke out, Mussolini, despite Italy's military unpreparedness, joined the war on Germany's side in 1940, hoping to share in the spoils of a quick victory. The result was a series of humiliating military disasters in North Africa and Greece. The war exposed the hollowness of the fascist regime's promises of strength and efficiency. By 1943, with Allied forces landing in Sicily, even Mussolini's own fascist Grand Council turned against him. He was arrested and removed from power. Though he was briefly rescued by German commandos, his rule was over. Fascism had promised to make Italy strong, proud, and respected. In the end, it left the nation defeated, occupied, and morally and physically devastated, facing the difficult task of rebuilding not just its cities, but its very soul.